Okay, gentlemen, we're winding down to the end of the semester, and I'm going to play a little video that will get us up to date or what is to be expected. Now, next Saturday we won't meet because of Thanksgiving break, and I do want to go over
I'm gonna
final
type.
exam with you, and also the preaching assignments. Our last class period will be December the 13th, and that's when each of you will preach your sermon. So I need for you to turn in your script the week before, uh, December the 5th or December the 6th, and then the last class is going to be the following Saturday. Um, and I'm kind of being redundant now, but some of this is going to be on the video. Uh, I'm going to go over the final with you today, and I'm going to get that email out to you later today. But I don't want the final until you may go ahead and do it and finish it, but I don't want it right away. There's a specific date that I want the final exam, and I'm going to go ahead and get that started with you. Now, what I do want to go over with you on your final and your sermon, uh, you need to use Microsoft Word. It needs to be typed in Microsoft Word. The font needs to be Times Romans, 12-point font. And I don't know what everybody is using, but I'm not getting everything in Microsoft Word from everybody. Uh, some are sending it, and I got to go in there and open it up. And then when I open it up, it's not formatted correctly. But in order for me to grade your paper the way that I want to grade it, it needs to be sent Microsoft Word, and it needs to be uh, the final needs to be single space, but the sermon is to be double space. Now, when I send you the final, it's 2 pages, front and back, and you won't be able to answer the questions from what I'm sending you. So you're gonna have to like retype it and then put the answer in after you retype it and everything. But I'm gonna play this video, and then I'm gonna come back. And the reason I'm playing the video is we got a couple of things going on here at the church. Um, we're giving away turkeys, and we're getting set up for that. And then I have an electrician that's coming, and but I'm going to come back and go over some things with you, make sure everybody's on the same page. Okay. All right. Let's see if I can find this thing. I had it. There we go. Can everybody see that?
Yes, sir.
All right. Here we go. All right, fellas. Here we go. Gentlemen, we're coming down to the end of the semester, and I want to go over what we're supposed to do and make sure that everyone has their dates. The last week of class is going to be December the 11th. That's the last time that we'll meet. Well, let me back up. The last week of class is December 11th. So that is December 13th for us, since we meet on Saturday. And we need to make the following adjustments. You should have this in your email, but just in case you don't, Today, you're going to receive your final exam. Now, that final exam is not due until December the 13th. Do not send it before December 13th, okay? I want you to work on this. I'm going to send it to you after class is over with, but you have between now and December 13th to work on it. It's going to be an open book exam, and it's going to come from your notes. I'm going to ask you questions about genre. There's going to be 5 questions based on genre, so you need to be familiar with the different genres in the Old Testament and New Testament. I'm going to assign you a text, and from that text, you're to identify the 3 types of genre that's mentioned in that text. You're going to have 4 questions from the book Somebody Must Come Preaching. And I've emphasized that we need a definition of expository, which is the same as textual preaching.
Yes.
Okay.
You're going to identify the 4 types of genre sermons found in the book Somebody Must Come Preaching. I want you to be able to give me 1 of 3 definitions by one of the writers for expository preaching. I'm going to assign you a sermon from Somebody Must Come Preaching, and then you are to identify what that person's 1 sentence thesis statement is. That's also the main idea. So I'm going to assign that to you. You have to read it, the sermon, and then identify what the 1 sentence is. 1 sentence thesis statement on the main idea. Preaching for the rest of us, essentials for text-driven preaching. You have 4 questions there. One of the questions deal with the definition of expository text-driven preaching from the book. I'm going to ask you a question about introductions. What are the mistakes that make introductions ineffective? I'm going to ask you a question about the deductive and inductive approach when you handle an epistle. Let me see here. We're going to talk about explanation. And in chapter 7, there are 3 components on explanation, and I want you to identify 1. From text-driven preaching, there are 4 questions, and that's pretty basic because I tell you what page to go to find it. And so it's going to be difficult, guys, for you not to pass this open book test because you just got to open the book. And really, I designed it like that because in textual preaching, what we're trying to get the preacher to do is to open the book and take out of the passage what's already there. And then be familiar with Sanukian's 3-stage outline. I've got 3 questions on the 3-stage outline. Now, I'm going to send this to you after class is over with, or when we finish with class today, but I don't want it until the last week of class. Okay. Next Saturday is Thanksgiving break, and I hope everyone will have a real good Thanksgiving. When we meet on December the 6th, you need to turn in your sermon manuscripts. I want all the sermon manuscripts turned in on December the 6th. Okay. And then on December the 13th, which is the last class period that we meet, each student will preach their sermon online. I know I asked you to preach it at some church, but I won't get to hear it. So I think it'd be best turn in that sermon manuscript December the 6th. And then the following Saturday, which is December the 13th, is when each four of you will preach that sermon online. I'll probably have some type of critique form ready for you. And, each of you will be able to critique each other. And I'll try to have that by December 13th. So that's the schedule to take us on out until the end of the semester. Last class period is December 13th. And you're going to get your final in the mail today. I don't want it turned in until the 13th. So you got some time to work on that. We got a break on November 29th. December the 6th, we'll meet, but you need to have your sermon manuscript turned in. Okay. And then December 13th, each student will preach their sermon online during class. I want to cover just maybe a couple things that I didn't get a chance to go over. And I do want you to be familiar with exegesis, what the term exegesis means, what you need to do to really make the sermon be a good sermon. And, one thing that will help you, you don't have to be a Greek scholar or a Hebrew scholar to do a good exegesis, but you can just ask 3 simple questions. And you probably already know what I'm going to say. But this is you preparing your sermon. Do you understand what the context of your passage is? Underline context. The second question is, do you understand what your passage means? So first start with context. Do you have a good understanding of the context? Do you understand what the passage means? And then do you understand how to apply that passage? Those are just 3 basic questions that will help you get started. If you read through Aiken's book on text-driven preaching, he does a real good job. And he starts off by saying, what is the place of exegesis in teaching and preaching? That's the question that he's asking, and that's the question he's going to answer. And he gives the illustration that you can think of exegesis like a hearing aid. We live in a deafening age. There's different voices that seek to distract us. And spiritually, we have become hard of hearing. The Hebrew writer said dull of hearing. But we cannot explain a text until we have first listened to it. So the Bible says a whole lot about listening, and we make a grave mistake if we think we can speak without first being spoken to. So what he's really trying to say is the pastor has to speak to you first. I'm in the habit of preparing a sermon that others will hear. But as we prepare our sermons, that sermon must speak to us as well. I told you that when I was growing up, my sister and I would play church. I would be preacher and she would be the song leader. And if we don't do a good exegesis, then we're playing church, or we're playing like we're the preacher. We go through the motions. We can think we're telling truth, unaware that we may just be pretending. So what would happen if the preacher could wear a hearing aid that would enable the preacher to listen to the text not as a muffled sound, but as a clear sounding trumpet. Those of us who teach and preach do have a hearing aid in the Word of God because the Word is alive and active or powerful. Hebrews 4 and 12. And Christianity is both vocal and articulate. It is based on a life-changing truth that requires a most respectful and careful hearing. So that's why I want to take a simple approach to exegesis. And as you prepare your sermon from Scripture, you got to ask these three questions. Do I understand what the context of my passage is? Now, why is that important? How do you expect those in the pew to understand if you don't have a good understanding of it? Okay. Then do you understand what the passage means? Okay. We're not really looking at what it says. We're talking about what it means right here. You know, what does it mean? And then do you understand how to apply the passage? Those are three basic questions. Now, after you go through that, then there are three different angles that you need to look at the passage. You want to look above the text, you want to look inside the text, and then you want to look under the text. You know, we try to keep this real simple, guys. You know, above the text is getting a bird's eye view of the whole. Then when we look inside the text, you're standing within it and you're trying to discern its meaning by using all of the exegetical skills or exegetical tools at your disposal. And then when you stand under the text, you're ready and willing to obey it and teach it in a way that applies its messages to others. So we're talking about discovery here. And these three basic areas of discovery above the text, inside the text, and under the text, you can call it context, meaning, and significance. This is really important. When I'm talking about above the text, we're talking about the context of the text. When we're talking about inside the text, we're talking about the meaning of the text. When we're talking about under the text, we're talking about the significance. We're just trying to put the sermon together. We're trying to put it together in a way where it makes biblical sense, you know. And remember, one thing that I've shared with you, that there's a difference between a speech and a sermon, okay? You see all the preparation we have to put into making a speech a sermon, you know. I can give a speech that doesn't have no biblical reference. I can give a speech that doesn't have to deal with any historical context. I can give a speech and I can ignore the language, the sentence structure. But if I'm going to give a sermon, all of those things have to be taken into consideration. We've got to do what is called historical analysis. That deals with the cultural, political, and religious situation facing the author and his original audience. Have you ever wondered why scripture, I think it's Isaiah 6, it says, in the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord high and lifted up. So why does Isaiah mention King Uzziah? Well, what happened during King Uzziah's reign? What year did he die? Those are the kind of questions that I think you should ask when you look at a text. I was just doing something. Where was I? Oh man, it talked about the emperor. Oh man, my memory is just gone. It was talking about the emperor. Was it Tiberius? Was it Claudius? audience, oh man, they'll come back to me. But I had to do some digging and some research. What was I doing? Oh Lord. Um, mm, well, it had to be a recent sermon. I think it was about giving. That the one I did about giving, and it talked about they went up to Jerusalem. Yeah, I think that was it. So when you do the historical analysis, you're going to address those kind of questions. A literary analysis deal with the way in which the text fits in its immediate surroundings in the book under study. So we're talking about meaning that takes us into the text itself. And I'm not going to bore you with all this other stuff. I could talk about textual analysis, lexical analysis, syntactical analysis, structural analysis, rhetorical analysis, traditional analysis. But I do think it's important that you land with theological analysis. What biblical truth is apparent in the text? And homiletical analysis. How do I best communicate this truth to others? So you're looking at what it says, what the text says, and then how do I get this over to the audience that I'm speaking to? Okay. All right. Now, of course, in your historical analysis, you're doing simple things. People that we teach, these are things that we teach our people when it comes to how to study the Bible. Who wrote the book, to whom was it sent? What was the relationship that existed between the author and readers? What was the historical situation that occasioned the writings of the book? Where was the author when writing? And where did the readers live? Those things are still important. And sometimes I'm trying not to be so technical, but I really want to say that's half your sermon. And maybe, the other half is like your introduction and your conclusion. So maybe I should say that's the meat of your sermon. Um, and I really want you to do real well with that. I spent a lot of time talking to you about genre, and I want you to understand genre from several perspectives. Of course, when we talk about genre, we're talking about, books of history, books of prophecy. Uh, um, we're talking about the books of law. We're talking about the gospels and the letters and those kind of things. But I also want you to see how genre is related to preaching. The process for preparing a sermon is treated in three stages: exegesis, in which the author's intended meaning for the text is determined. Now, when I say the author, I'm talking about the author of the book that you're reading or the passage that you're reading. Secondly, you're looking at principle development, in which the timeless truths of the text and their significance are derived from the exegetical analysis. Remember, timeless truth with Sanukian, the three-stage outline, and he has a timeless truth in that outline. So this is your process of preparing a sermon: exegesis, principle development, and then homiletics. Homiletics is the exegetical evidences and the principles crafted into a sermon structure that features explanation and application of text. Now, I want to go back to something I said earlier about a speech and a sermon. Martin Luther King gave a speech, "I Have a Dream." That was not a sermon, that was a speech, okay? Abraham Lincoln gave the Gettysburg Address. That was a speech, that was not a sermon. both of those men told truths in those speeches, but I hope you see the difference between a speech and a sermon. A sermon is explaining a text that's already written. Um, you know, I'm trying to think of what am I doing tomorrow? I'm in First Thessalonians. I think I'm gonna do First Thessalonians 5, where it says in everything, give thanks. So give thanks in all things, something like that. Um, why did Paul say that? What did he mean by everything? You know, what's the application? Well, in the little cursory study that I did, there are at least three imperatives, and giving thanks, I believe, is the third of three. I'll probably say that in the sermon, and then try to give some background of what was going on that caused Paul to write to the church at Thessalonica. So genre is related to preaching. Genre is also related to exegesis. Uh, and here's a quote worth writing down. All right. I'm not recording this, so you guys got to take notes and write this down. Okay. Um, an experienced reader comes to the text. I'll repeat that. An
Experienced reader.
text,
Mhm.
storehouse of skills and aptitudes. I started to say appetites. That's because I'm hungry. An experienced reader comes to a text with a storehouse of skills and aptitudes and a repertoire of reading strategies. An experienced reader comes to a text with a storehouse of skills and aptitudes and a repertoire of reading strategies acquired through previous encounters with various forms of literature. Now, what does that mean? Okay, what does that mean? That means you come to a text, you experience, but you're bringing your skills, you bring your aptitudes, uh, you're going on what you've read in the past, and you're looking at it from different forms of literature. So you got to ask these exegetical questions to help probe the literary features of the text. So, what is the genre of the text? What is the rhetorical function of this genre? What literary devices does this genre employ to achieve its rhetorical effect? How, in particular, does the text under consideration in its own literary setting embody the characteristics and dynamics in those first three questions? Those first three questions is what's the genre of the text? What's the rhetorical function of this genre? And what literary devices does this genre employ to achieve its rhetorical effect? Okay. I want you to be familiar with also genre and textual principles. Okay. Genre, and all of this is in text-driven preaching. Genre and textual principles. The exegetical treatment of a passage of scripture is intended to determine the author's intended meaning of the text. That meaning certainly addressed a body of original recipients in their historical situation. Now, I don't want you to think that scripture don't apply to us, but what I want you to do is start off trying to find out why it was written to the recipients. The meaning of the author in its particularity may or may not directly apply to readers in other places and times. However, the scriptures are God's written revelation of himself, and he still speaks through what he has spoken. Now, uh, when you think about that, there are principles that can be applied from a passage that is specific to a group. It's specific to a group, but there are principles that can be applied. The difficulty with some texts, however, is discerning correctly what God is saying today, what the contemporary significance of the meaning of a biblical text is. And that's probably why we have some of the issues and some of the problems that exist in our brotherhood right now. What I'm seeing happening today, and this is a little bit off the subject of, I think you'll understand where I'm coming from. I'm noticing that there's a presentation of instruments being used by churches of Christ when they're announcing events, church events. So in the background, you got music applied. And I had a conversation with a preacher because I asked him about it, and he was somewhat a little defensive. And he said, "It is what it is." I said, "Well, what's your purpose?" He doesn't have a purpose. It is what it is. And then he said, "Well, it's not violating any New Testament passage." and previously, I asked, I said, "Is your congregation still a cappella? Do you teach and practice a cappella?" He wholeheartedly teaches and practices a cappella. But then in this presentation, he's really giving the plan of salvation in one, then he's teaching a biblical doctrine, and there's just instruments of music in the background. Well, it's inconsistent. It's like bait and switch. To me, it's hypocritical to teach and practice a cappella, but then to present a church function with instruments in the background. So even though writing to the church at Ephesus and writing to the church at Colossae, even though the Hebrew writer was writing to saints who were going through persecution, the principle of the imperative applies to us today. I think that's important. It was an imperative to that audience, but the principle applies to us as well today. Okay. I think that if you guys get this, you'll be ready. I'm looking forward to your sermons. I want you to probably, let me see what we got open. And well, you're going to turn in your manuscript on the 6th. Well, not only do you have to work on introduction and then the body of your sermon, but you need to have a good conclusion. And oftentimes a conclusion is a summary of the sermon. And you might want to give your takeaways. This is what you want them to take away from the sermon, and you're summarizing it, so to speak, and this is the take home take home points that you want them to have. Okay, all right. Okay, brothers, I've enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to what you're going to turn in, and I just want to make sure the last week of class, our last meeting is going to be December the 13th. So I'm going to send this final to you today. You can start working on it, but please do not send it back to me until like December the 13th. Okay. So that means I'll get your sermon manuscript before I get your final exam. Now, let me say this about the final exam. You're going to have to retype this, or you're going to have to, you're going to have to do some work with the typing and the answer. And listen, I want this to be neat. I want you to use Microsoft Word. I want you to use the font is Times Romans, and it's 12-point font. Now, your sermon needs to be double spaced. Your final doesn't have to be double spaced, but the final and the sermon needs to be sent to me in Microsoft Word. For some, I'm having difficulty because you're not sending it in Microsoft Word. I've got to go open up something else. Now, if you're having difficulty with emailing it, then you're going to have to mail it to me. No, let's not even do that. Let's stick with the email. I was about to say send it to me. No, I don't want to do that. No, because I just want you to use Microsoft Word. The final can be single space, but the sermon has to be double space. And keep in mind, when you preach the sermon on December 13th, you're really preaching a manuscript. So whatever you say on December 13th has to be in that sermon on December the 6th. Okay? All right. All right, brothers, enjoyed you, and that's going to be it. I think that case. Okay, gentlemen, I think we got the gist of everything in the recording. Let's kind of go over, and let me see if you have any questions. Okay, about the final, about the sermon, and any other assignments that we have.
No, I'm good. I'm just hey, ready to go to work. Finish it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Were you able to type anything in the chat?
No, I'm gonna play with it after we um go offline. Well, I'm gonna stay online, but I got my computer turned sideways, and I don't have any space to type it in. It's just like it's just a blank screen down at the bottom.
Yeah. Okay. What I didn't add on the video, and here's another part of the final, and I call it sermon preparation. This is sermon preparation. Um, I want you to be able to put into words the difference between a good sermon and a good speech. You know, what's the difference? We talked about it last week, and I think I may have mentioned it again today. But this is like an essay part where you describe the difference between a good sermon and a good speech. So some sermons are speeches, and I hope that by now you're able to tell the difference. Also, I want you to be able to explain the difference between a textual sermon and a topical sermon. Okay. Now, textual and expository are closely connected, but if I did my job, you'll be able to uh, tell me the difference between the two. So, in telling me the difference between the two, you might have to describe both of them. So, by describing a textual sermon and describing a topical sermon, I'll be able to see that you know the difference. And another question that I have on the sermon prep is which assigned book of the three for this class benefited you the most? So we had three books that was assigned, and I just want you to tell me which one and then why. So it doesn't matter to me which book you select. I want to know in your own words why that book benefited you. What did you come away with from that particular book? And then another question is what tools are you using for your sermon preparation? So that's an opportunity for you to just tell me what it is that you use. Um, you know, tell me what version of scripture that you use. What other versions do you look at? Just give me the whole feel. You know, um, we talked about Lectio Divina. I don't know if you use that or not. You might mention prayer. How prayer is a tool that you use. So that's pretty much an overview. Now, what the goals of the class was, um, the objectives of this class was you would be able to define what a textual sermon is as opposed to an expository and topical sermon. You will be able to distinguish the different genres of Old Testament and New Testament scriptures. Probably didn't do as much in detail as I wanted to, articulating the basic principles for understanding the Bible. So I didn't spend a lot of time there. The fourth objective was you will be able to identify the main idea of the text. That's real important. I mean, what I really want you to do is be able to, in a sentence, tell me what your sermon is about, and it's the thesis statement of your sermon. So, in this sermon, I want the hearers to blah blah blah, or in this sermon, I intend to, or the point of this sermon is whatever, or I will attempt in this sermon to uh, blah blah blah. Um, and then the fifth objective is you will prepare and write a textual sermon. Okay. So this is, a test is not to, a test can be challenging, but a test it allows you the opportunity to put on paper what's in your head. In Genesis 22, when God did tempt Abraham, that really was a test, and God wanted to see what was in Abraham's heart. So put it in practice, put it on paper. Uh, you know, let's make sure you got it. Those kind of things. I mentioned a little bit about the conclusion, and I kind of wanted to go over that again. Um, your introduction should be something that catches the attention of the audience, but is directly related to the sermon. Then you've got your body of the sermon, and you may have 2 or 3 points in the sermon, and then you may have some sub points under each of those main points. Your conclusion summarizes what you presented in the body of your sermon, and it also challenges the audience. It's a takeaway. Now, we can't always assume that people pick up what we put out. So you have to tell them what you want. I want you to go away, and sometimes you can do this on the front end, and then come back on the conclusion and support it. Brother Red, if you listen to any of Brother Red's sermons, he'll tell you on the front end what he plans to do. This is what I intend to do with this sermon. Then on the back end, he'll say, give you takeaways. Because we don't always want to leave it up to the person in the pew to determine their own takeaway, but you are being persuasive in your sermon and convincing. So just go ahead and tell them, I want you to leave here today knowing what mercy is. That's on the front end. And then on the back end, I want you to demonstrate mercy to someone. I'm just giving you an example of what it might be like. Which Washington has the one on patience in James?
Jimmy.
Jimmy, okay. Everybody needs patience. So what is it that you think James wanted his readers to know? And what is it that you want the audience that you're speaking to? So say, for example, you were preaching this sermon to a bunch of women. How would that sermon change from a bunch of women only and a mixed audience? And everybody can make that same application. So, Brother Gentry, if you're preaching Lamentations to women only, Brother Washington, you got John 15, right? Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So let's say you're just speaking to young people, a group of young people. Let's say you're just talking to young men, young boys. So you see how the way you were structure and deliver your sermon might be different for each group.
That's true.
What contemporary illustrations can you use in each of your sermon?
Right.
I'm not trying to make it difficult, but so I may ask you on December 13th. You put your sermon together like you're preaching it to your church, the church where you serve. So I may ask you. You don't have to put this in the paper, but I may ask you to give us some context of the demographics of the people you would preach this to on a Sunday. Now, you're going to preach it to us like you're preaching it to your church.
Right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. In that same vein, sometimes I've noticed that preachers, sometimes we'll tell a joke, and sometimes the joke will be dealing with racism. Okay, but if we're in a mixed audience or we have Caucasians in our congregation, I've heard ministers say, "Well, hold on, and let me see if brother or sister so and so is here before I say this." And everybody is knowing who brother so and so is. He's a Caucasian or she's a Caucasian, and if they are in the audience, uh, he won't tell the joke. Or if they're not in the audience, he'll go ahead on and make the statement. And I'm just wondering, really, should you even say that at all? I mean, if you know, can we just take color out of it? And if it's applicable to the message, why not just say it instead of pausing for a minute to look and see if your Caucasian brothers or sisters are in the audience?
Mm.
I mean, help me out with that.
Well, I think a speaker has to know his audience, and he has to be aware what will work and what won't work. What's offensive to one person may not be offensive to another. Um, and I think that um, you'll get a feel of what works and what doesn't work probably after you deliver it. Or sometimes, have you ever been in a sermon and you said something and you know it didn't go over well?
Right.
In your mind you said, I shouldn't have said that. You
True.
know. So sometimes a thing can be planned, and and then sometimes it's a spontaneous thing, and it's a judgment call, um, and we don't ever want to be offensive to others, and I think the intent will determine how you should go about it. Are you saying this with a motive to embarrass? Are you saying it to mock people? And of course, we don't want to use the pulpit to do that.
Right.
You don't want to do that at all. Um, and then it just depends on the relationship that the speaker has with that audience. Some things can be said and done, and and it's colorful. And then sometimes things can be said and done, and it just, you just, everybody in there knows it shouldn't have been said.
Right.
You know, it shouldn't have been said. You know, man, that has happened. I mean, that has happened to me, where I get out there and I've said something, and it wasn't planned in my sermon. And sometimes you just have to go ahead and just apologize.
Well,
Uh,
that's true.
yeah, you kind of have to apologize about some things, and go from there. You know,
Right.
well, that's a good observation, though, brother. Yeah.
Hmm. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been there too, and I came back and apologized. I said, "Well, hey, it wasn't." I said, "You all know me," and I said, "I'm not the type of individual that try to be condescending or try to denigrate anybody. And if it came across like that, that just wasn't my intent. So I apologize quickly
Yeah.
and keep it moving."
Yeah. And then sometimes it don't even hit you till after the sermon. And there have been times when my wife would tell me in a minute, what was going on with you? What was you thinking about? And I would say, I don't know. I have no idea what I was thinking about. It was a spur of the moment kind of thing.
Right.
And sometimes we make mistakes in the pulpit, and just as long as it's not intentional, you
Right.
know. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Anybody else? But Neil, you got to unmute. Okay.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Got you now.
Are you having any trouble with my email when it's sent to you? I mean, on the lessons or anything?
No, you're good.
Okay. Well, I can send you my address on that just shortly. I wasn't able to get that going on the
chat.
On the chat. Some of it I don't have complete expertise. I'm a basic computer operator.
Okay.
Very, very basic, but I can send you my physical address. If along with and I'll get that to you shortly as far as that goes.
Yeah. So if everybody just email me your physical address, when your email comes in, I know it's you and everything.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, guys. So the next time we meet is when?
In about 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
In 2 weeks. And so we'll be in the month of December, right?
Yeah, December 6th.
December 6th. And what are we doing December 6th?
We are
we're turning in our manuscripts,
right.
turning in our sermon, word for word.
Okay. All right. Okay.
You need it before then, or don't you, or does that matter?
Well, you got up to December the 6th to get it to me. Okay.
Okay.
I want you to have enough time to work it out.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll get as soon as I get your email today. Well, let me not say as soon. If I get your email today, then you'll get the final. Okay. You'll get the final.
Mm-hmm.
So after December 13th is when I want that final, like the next week or so.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't check with Brother Smith to find out when he wants grades to come in, but the final and your sermon is the major part of your grade.
Mm-hmm.
And then the work that you've done prior, the reason I want your email, your physical address, I'll mail all of that back to you with my remarks and everything.
Okay.
All
right. Well, thank you.
Okay, gentlemen, if you need to look at this, I didn't record it, but if you go to my personal YouTube page, which is Michael Crusoe, you can go back over today's lesson. It's Michael Crusoe 1332, I think is the way you pull it up. Michael Crusoe, Crusoe Ministry, and you may need like something that says at Michael Crusoe 1332. You might need that.
Okay, Dr. Crusoe, I appreciate you.
All right, here. That's some good stuff.
Well, I hope so. Sometimes I'm a little concerned. I hope it's not too much. I hope I made it plain. Tried to make it as plain as I could, and appreciate you guys. Okay, all right.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Take care. Have a good day.
All right, y'all have a good Thanksgiving.
Yeah, the rest of y'all.
Right. Y'all too.
Yeah. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Okay. Yes, sir. You too. And all the rest of y'all.